Welcome everyone to the latest episode of Voices to Action podcast. I'm Ben Hookway, CEO of Relative Insight. And in this episode, we're focusing on employee analytics. So one of the applications Relative Insight is used for is to really try and understand what employees mean so that companies can improve their policies, procedures, and their strategy in order to make the best of that. And we've got a great guest. We've got Sam Valentine from Miro with us today. So Sam, I will let him introduce himself. He's got a really, really interesting background in using analytics in change management, understanding employees, and really making the best of that technology to get a sort of true understanding of, is what do people mean? What do they say? And how can organization make the best of it? So Sam, thanks for coming along. Welcome. Maybe I'll turn over to you. If you can give us a quick tour of your resume, what you've done, what your specialisms are, that'd be fantastic.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here talking to you as well. So obviously analytics, listening, understanding what people are saying is kind of the core of what I've been doing for the last few years. So I'm currently head of employee experience for Miro, and like how I always explain that is understanding and trying to influence how people feel about work, hopefully influencing that in a positive direction. So like I've had a peripatetic, I think, journey towards this. So I started off working for the British Council many years ago, sort of many postings around the world. That's where sort of in those postings cross-culturally, that's where I started to get really interested in the cultural dimensions of leadership and management and how people work together. That took me to Cambridge Assessment and Cambridge University Press, where I was working sort of largely in communications and change, and like big transformation projects happening there. So like a lot of flexible working was a big one. We merged the two organizations, so University Press and Assessment. And so like throughout that few years, I was going really deep into employee sentiment and how we take that sentiment as data in the same way that would take attrition or turnover or salary, and use that to make big policy decisions or big communication decisions. Again, try to influence how we lead. And then that took me into tech sector. So most recently into Miro. Again, Miro, all about innovation and collaboration and, a scaling tech company. A lot of challenges, huge opportunities. Our biggest asset that we have is employees. How do we focus then towards the processes that are really going to sustain high performance for the company? And so that's what I'm really interested in there is, again, that sort of employee voice as strategic data point.
Yeah.
And that's where I try and position myself.
So, I mean, you've been doing this through quite, I guess, one of the biggest periods of upheaval and change, both from a technology and analytics and tools which are available to you, but then also the kind of, the business environment in that, you've got better tools now to sort of understand employees, I guess. Obviously we can talk about lockdown and what happened through then. And you've also got, I guess, employees feeling more empowered to say more as well. So have you sort of seen the changes both in the technology, the macro factors, and also kind of the willingness for employees to sort of speak up, give an opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big change is obviously AI and what AI can do and how we use AI and the pace of insights, like the pace of hearing something and turn it into action. When I started 15, 20 years ago, I remember the big engagement surveys, and it would be a 4-month turnaround and someone would be sat in a room kind of going through everything. Now, I think within hours, we can go from like, this is what 1,000 people have told us. This is what we need to do about it. And that pace is great. I think we have to not go too quickly and miss things, but AI has really sped that up. But within that, I think people are empowered to say more. I think that's definitely the case, and there is much more to say, and there are more things to say it about. But as a tech sector, as a society, layoffs, cost of living, job security, that trust and fostering that trust and making sure that there are ethics around it, I think are really important. I think we're hearing more, but it's not necessarily the case that people are giving the same level of candor that they have done. And I think that that comes through trust. And AI, on the one hand, if you're talking to the robots, it's maybe safer. On the other hand, where's that data going? Can you see the privacy policies? Are people really assured that what they're saying will be anonymized and objective? So I think there's some challenges probably that have changed the game a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I recognize all of that, all of those things. Even in the time of running Relative Insight, the amount of changes that have gone on in employee opinion, what we do, what we seek to do about it.
Yeah.
I think so. One of the questions I think is there's more and more ways to sort of gather feedback from employees now. So there's surveys, there's like ad hoc things you can do, and obviously the tools are there to do the analytics. So I guess two questions like meaningful analytics. There's analytics, and then there's meaningful analytics,
Yeah.
and then there's kind of like, okay, you've got meaningful analytics. Are you then actually going to do something with this new information and knowledge that you have? And certainly in other use cases in that Relative Insight operates in, for example, customer experience or voice of customer, then it's it's pretty clear like what needs to be done. I expect though that that transition from, okay, this is true, this is great insight, doing something about it, that might be a bigger hurdle. So I'm really interested to know what the interface between like these insights that you bring and then actually getting something done. How's that changed? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed for me personally. I'm not necessarily going to say this is an industry change because I can't say that with confidence. But for me personally, I think we've maybe moved from just listening to what people are saying to understanding what they're doing and are they saying and doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So the X data and the O data. So we can look at people's satisfaction with career growth or leadership, and we can look at whether they are following leadership direction or applying for promotions, and so reconcile that together. So like that, putting those two things together, I think more and more as we sort of focus towards the turning it into actions, it's the looking at what people are doing and then are they telling us why they're doing that?
Yeah.
So getting much more towards root cause. It's like people telling us what they feel is really important. But there's, as I said before, there's a lot to talk about and a lot of people talk about things. But if we see attrition go up or if
Yeah.
we see silos or collaboration challenges, we have to then understand like why are those silos happening? Why are people leaving? And are they like, can we see within the data what's going on and how deep can we get towards a root cause? And so that I think has been the change, is just sentiment plus action to sentiment that helps us understand the action.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I think the word, the sentiment, I've always got quite a big problem with it actually, because there's some people when they say sentiment, they mean something quite detailed. Some other people might mean positive, negative, which, personally, I'm kind of like, well, what use is that? You can only actually do something with insight if it's at a detailed enough level for you actually to make a meaningful change. To your point, root cause analysis. So it's like really understanding root cause of employee frustration or delight or whatever is kind of like, that's the thing that you really need to understand. Is the appreciation of, or the understanding that root cause is what matters, in your experience, do employee engagement groups really understand that? Do top management really understand that? Or do you think there's still some education needs doing in giving something more concrete with, rather than just sort of saying sentiments positive or negative, cliche being, ENPS is whatever the number is, sentiment is, give me a number positive, it's like, okay, job done, I can go on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, I think that we're still on that journey. I think
Yeah.
things are getting better at that. I think again, it sort of depends on approach to culture and beliefs. And to go back a little bit, like, but when I was a teacher, so I like straight out of university, I taught English for a bit, and I remember being really annoyed with other teachers talking about a class of students as they don't want to learn this, they're all visual learners, or you'll never do anything with them. And I was like, well, that's a group of 20 people. You can't apply like they to all of them. And as I sort of went through, yeah, through corporate life into engagements, I think they're unhappy. They don't like leadership. Yeah, the same sort of thing. Applying the same thing to 1,000 people.
Yeah.
I think as we've got better at like looking at this, we can say, well, yeah, the leadership culture that we have is causing attrition to spike amongst people who've been here 5 years, or the promotion opportunities aren't working for our engineers. So we can sort of turn it around, and that root cause being, well, let's hold the mirror up to us and look at it. And so to go back to that teaching example, they're not all visual learners. You're not a very good teacher who's like explaining things very well. Like we have to have a look at that. And so I think, yeah, we're seeing that more, that ability to see the bugs within the system. We sort of talk about that quite a lot of Miro as like culture as a product, and culture being something we have to design, and culture being something that we iterate and tend to.
Yeah.
And people are good at telling us the bugs in that. And we can see the impact of the bugs, and then we can fix them and move. So I think if you've got that sort of culture lens, I think it really helps to find the root cause. Again, I sort of encounter very different models as I'm talking to other people and like out at conferences stuff, but I think that's the way that things are tending to.
Interesting. So do you think that do you find that like root causes differ between different cohorts of employees? So for example, people in their 20s might have one set of root causes, people in their 30s might have another set of root causes, or people in one location might have one set of root causes compared to another group, or and so on and so on, like whether that's cross-functional. So like, do you do like root cause analysis down to that kind of level so you can be even more targeted?
Yeah, yeah, we tried to. Again, I I might come into conflict with people. I prefer to see, like, rather than generation or function or location, the drivers as the cohort. So are you driven by salary and compensation? Are you driven by the need to learn? Are you driven by the need to provide for your family at the moment? And these things like flex a bit more. So I think, yeah, we can sort of it's very difficult to understand that. And I think we use generation or job type as maybe a bit
Yeah.
of a proxy. But yeah, I think as far down as we can get, with also the risk that comes with that is that you can get too granular and explain everything away, because we can have a look at a specific thing. Career is an issue, but this person is promotion, and this person is skills growth, and we get so granular that it becomes meaningless, and then you can't fix 1,500.
Okay. So sorry, just to make sure I understand what you mean there. So if you get too granular, the danger is you say, it's just because one person is concerned with this, therefore it's not really an issue.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. Yeah.
And that I always frame that in terms of like data literacy, I think, and data confidence. And there comes a confidence with data that you don't need to go lower. You can say we've got a category problem with careers, and I'm sort of fixating on that as an example. Sorry, but we've got a category problem here. We take that category forward and we explore that with people, versus we try to segment and granularize that down to a point where it becomes unmanageable.
Too much detail, you run the risk of dismissing it as being a one-off, but not enough means you're not taking any meaningful action. So it's finding the right balance. Is what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. It's having the confidence to say this is where we're going to focus now,
Yeah.
rather than we need more data, we need more data, we need more data. And I think, yeah, that there is a sort of degree of confidence that comes with saying we've got enough data now to know we've got a problem.
So relative insight, like we talk about, insight is only any use if it's detailed enough for you to act on. The other key pillar is time, actually. So
Yeah.
there's only any, your insight is only ever use if A, you can act on it, and B, you can actually act on it in time to actually make a difference. So I'd love to hear a bit about how that's evolved for you, because, going back to the days when it was like a once a year employee opinion survey, which then took like 4 months to analyze. What's the difference now in like the time frame that data is gathered, the analysis done, and then action taken? How's that looking these days?
Like much better, much better. I think we're the risk is we're too fast. So I think the risk becomes that you're too fast, and maybe the perception is that you haven't done the necessary or applied the necessary rigor. But I think with AI and a lot of the tools we have, we can very, very quickly sort of get to, here are some really sort of solid, detailed insights. So I would say like within a week we should be able to have directionally say, within a week of any sort of major listening event, like we should be able to directionally say, yeah, we are following these 3 tracks broadly, and then we can decompose that and find, but we know where we're going and we know what we've got to solve. There's also the question of scale, and I think there are big systemic challenges which we have. That takes time, and that takes resource, and that takes effort, and that takes leadership engagement, and that might be months to operationalize and resource. But I think we can get to the starting line fairly quickly.
Yeah, look.
And there are other things which we can say really quickly. Like, okay, this team don't like the way their manager's talking to them. Manager, do a bit of training, like think about your communication stuff. That's a quick fix, and we can sort of segment that. So I think it's what we have is the ability to prioritize and sequence much better. We did.
Yeah, I understand, because one of the other, the pillars we talk about a lot tend to be with enough detail to make it actionable in time, so you can actually do it. The other one is confidence, actually, as well. So, and AI is both a blessing and a curse for confidence, I think. Which is kind of why we employ the techniques we deploy. So you got like metrics, deterministic metrics that you can actually get confidence. But it also relates to the scale of the initiative you end up putting in place. So if you're going to do a big cultural, re-engineering thing, then you better be sure you've got a lot of very confident analytics that this is right. Yeah, fascinating. So can you maybe talk through an example of a kind of real life analytics showed this, was surprising, and then this action was taken, sort of put the flesh on the bones of some of this without giving anything that you shouldn't be away, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think enough time has passed on this one. It's one of my favorite relative insight examples that we went through. It was over lockdown, and went through a merger of two companies. And so at that point, I was sort of head of employee experience for both companies, and we announced the merger. Then we had a year to enact the merger, and then it sort of came into force, which is the opposite of the way people normally do these things. And obviously there's a lot of kind of anxiety and worry that goes along with these things. So we did monthly pulse surveying along the way. And one of the questions was, how are you feeling? And we sent the same survey to both organizations with just that open-ended question, how are you feeling? And with one organization, we saw a huge spike kind of at the start with words related to fear, anxiety, frustration, and a lot of references to takeover and feeling second class and like those sorts of emotions. Whereas in the other organization, it was much more sort of positive. And we sort of dug into it. The insight that we took from that is that the order we always talked about things was company A, then company B. So in all the communications, we'd always talk about company A, then company B. And if we switched them round, so company B goes first when we talk about them, then there's company A, the perceptions of takeover and the fear and anxiety dropped off very steadily.
Interesting.
It was a super simple tweak. It was sort of like a really interesting insight. Like, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but we really saw that words related to takeover and fear and anxiety go down with a simple comms tweak of just, you know, be mindful about which company we talk about first when we're talking about them merging and how that's going to look. So that was, yeah, like what one again that was I found really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean these stories of what can be quite subtle linguistic changes to communicate what you actually mean. So what you mean is quite often not what is received.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a I still remember doing the values of relative insight, and um, one of the ones that was most important to me was loyalty. So I always felt that anyone who came to relative insight, like we should be really loyal to. But when the messaging for that went out, it was received. You know, it was like we are loyal. Basically, that was the phrase. But when it was received as like we've got you. You're loyal to me, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Um, so it got changed actually to like we've got you back. So, but that was a really interesting. It's a very similar thing in that like what you intend to communicate is not what's received, especially actually in times of stress. You know, when you're talking about a merger, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, yeah, the way, yeah, the way that things are perceived. And yeah, the I think our relative is really good at like has always helping to understand how these things are perceived. You can go with the best, most positive intent, but there is always going to be some nuance to it. And it's one of my AI sidekicks that I've built within Miro as well. I will sort of give it the prompt. You are a cynical, disengaged employee who always tends towards the negative. You know, you're going to communicate the meaning that you take from this, and you're going to deliberately twist it. But I go quite extreme into it, and then sort of put in the communications and say like, how would you read this? And it's always interesting what comes back. Like, yeah, you're using the word resilience as a weapon and you talk about empowerment, but yeah, you don't really mean that. And yeah, that gives some insights. And then that also helps when we go through, like put a lens on what we're seeing from responses like survey data as well. So like
Mm.
giving that, trying to go really extreme with it, again, sort of helps with some of the prompting that we look at.
So it's also very interesting, I think, because Miro, like fundamentally, is like a collaboration product or set of products, right? For employees to collaborate. Do you see any for the Miro road in particular? It's got this quite interesting, you know, technology and analytics on maybe the team at Miro, but then does that ever like overlap with thinking around the product or how Miro as a company thinks about its culture for collaboration because it's a collaboration company?
Yeah, so I like we always trying to be very intentional about collaboration. So one of my favorite things to talk about on podcasts and conferences is, yeah, I think most companies, in my experience, always we do culture sessions. It always starts with how would you describe your culture? What is your culture?
Mm.
And I think, yeah, a Miro, we sort of tend to look at it more as what does your culture do? And if you cannot answer what your culture does for you, like then you can sort of really design towards that. So our culture is collaborative versus our culture makes it easy to collaborate.
Interesting.
You can, yeah, does and then you can just ask people the question, well, does it make it easy to collaborate? Like, are you able to talk freely? Can you just call someone up from a different department? And we start to get sort of quite yes, no answers to this, which we can sort of go in and design. So we really take that principle through the product as well. Like, is it doing what we want it to do? Is it driving innovation? Is it making it easy to get to from idea to delivery and cut out some of the drudge work in the middle? And is it easy for people to come in and contribute, for that contribution to be meaningful, which is how we've designed like a lot of the features within that. I can't speak too much about it because I'm not one of the very clever people who work on like designing it. But that ethos of launch, iterate, build, I think that really cuts.
Yeah, fascinating. So maybe switching gears a little bit to the, I guess, brass tacks of employee engagement. Um, when management are thinking, what is it that we are trying to uncover? I mean, obviously the purpose is to have engaged, talented employees doing their best for the company. That's the ultimate aim.
Yeah.
Um, how does that sort of show up in either KPIs for you or a sort of other measures that you kind of think about how you report to what you provide the analytics around?
So yeah, it shows up in how we drive the business outcomes that we're sort of focused on. So we could take a out of company at OKR and then look at that. So build an amazing product. Build an amazing product that customers love. Like that. That's a solid OKR. It's maybe not quantified enough, but we can sort of start with that and then look at the risks and threats to that OKR. So one risk might be if your product team is high attrition risk or high burnout risk or haven't got the direction that they need, then there is a significant risk to achieving that. And then how do we understand how that product building team is feeling about this? And then how do we scale that risk and how do we assess it? And then sort of working back from there, how do we start to mitigate that? And then back from there, are these the right things to put in place to protect? So we sort of start there and work backwards into what is it specifically we want to look at for this to protect the teams that are delivering. And so that's how we sort of approach that. So it's less about and again, I think maybe sort of 15, 20 years ago, like a lot of surveying was about discovery. You'd ask big open-ended questions and employees would say, we want more of this or less of this. And you'd go, okay, well, let's change things. Now I think the pendulum sort of swing back the other way. It's starting with a hypothesis and testing it to make sure that we've got the right security blankets in place, basically.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. So, I think we know we have customers who, for example, they use this to uncover like why their EMPS number is what it is, obviously by looking at the unstructured text and the open ends which are associated with that. I think the OKR. Oh, sorry. And so before I go on to that, I guess the other, we also have customers where, they've got maybe a small number of very, very high paid practitioners in a specialist industry.
Yes.
So obviously the incentive there is like, rehiring those people is like costly, expensive, lasts a long time. Training them costs a lot. And so obviously there's a strong financial incentive to make sure that they're happy and they don't go away. The OKR thing's I find that's really interesting. That's the first time I've heard that actually. And
Really?
yeah. And I like it because it's, we when we're planning inside Relative Insight, we take a similar approach actually. So, we do risk evaluation. We know what we want to get produced in terms of a new product or a new service. We think a lot about, say, talent density around that kind of concept as well. Relative Insight is not yet an empire of 10,000 people, so it's quite easy for me to sort of kind of walk up to people and just kind of understand what's going on. So, but to apply this sort of OKR methodology to the risks, I think that's really interesting. Yeah. So, which leads me to my next question, actually. So,
Yeah.
you're obviously an erudite and sophisticated thinker around these kinds of topics. Um, are you typical or are you atypical? Like when you kind of talk to your peers or you kind of think about the other companies you work for, what's the state of maturity of thinking around these topics, do you think, generally speaking?
Um, I think the state of maturity within sort of people analytics is very high. I think it's really moved forward a long way. And so I think I would describe the sort of people analytics employee experience community as erudite and sophisticated, far more than I am, I think, most of the time. I think it's not always It's not always easy within the corporate context. I think it's still a field that is getting the seat at the table and moving into the driving seat, and having that impact. So it's definitely maturing and developing.
Mm.
I spoke to a few people at some Formula One teams recently, so I've come back to the sports
Oh,
there,
interesting.
and some of them were sort of talking about how some of the changes over the last few years that have happened in Formula One have, like, obviously the engineering is amazing, but the focus on people analytics and getting the best out of engineers and all the support people, that's translating into the hundredth of a millisecond that you need to per lap to win a Grand Prix. And so, like, there's some of the Formula One companies that have invested into those people analytics and understanding and having that conversation are the ones seeing results, because it's the whole paddock that is benefiting rather than just the investment into car and driver. So I think it is sort of, as a field, like, really coming through, and like that's a very visible sort of example. But I definitely see that across other industries as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, with Formula One, like the KPI is lap time. It's kind of you can't really get away from that. And
Yeah,
I'm a sort of moderate Formula One fan. Been a couple of races and things like that, and I follow it with my son. And certainly, if I think about the team that springs to mind, which has gone under sort of the biggest cultural shift in a positive way, has been McLaren.
yeah,
I think what Zach Bryan has done at McLaren, of all the people, I keep on saying to people, one of my dinner party guests would be Zach. Right.
yeah.
I would really, really like to meet this guy, just understand what he does. Maybe he'll come on the podcast, but we'll see. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, but I think it's that thing, and I think a lot of Formula Ones who say it's like the investment in the whole paddock, and like that extra, like, the drivers are as good as they can get and the car is as good as they can get, but the difference is the person making the tiniest screw and doing that on time, but like that could make the
Yeah.
difference, and that ethos, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah, and you've really got to understand the whole team, and
Yeah,
no matter what industry you're in. So a really wise guy once said to me, a bit contrarian, but he said empathy is really overrated and actually quite dangerous in leadership. And the reason he said it is because number one, it's exhausting if you try and like empathize with everyone underneath you. If you're in a big company, you just can't do it.
yeah,
But the other problem is you empathize most readily with people who are most like you.
yeah.
And so all your signals get warped. So this person who's a sort of psychologist who does consulting for boards and things like that says that you need data. You need data.
Yeah. 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 No, I would agree with that. I would, fully agree with that. I think the empathy helps. It helps contextualize the data, and I think, you always need the human in it. But as a leader, it's probably not possible to listen deeply to everyone all the time, because you're going to get very conflicting things. But the data points the way, and that's what I always say about, like, survey results. Like, it's a signpost that points you in the right direction. It's not a firm answer. It's not going to give you, but it will point you in the right direction. I think, you've got to sort of navigate from there. But that's the value. It was empathy probably won't point you in the right direction. It helps you
Yeah.
contextualize it and helps you understand it, but it's not the signpost.
Okay, good. So he wasn't wrong. So
Yeah, I still think empathy is very important, but okay.
yes, no, yeah. I'm not seeking to dismiss it. But when he said it, it was kind of like, yeah, you are right. You are right.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what signal do most management teams miss the most when it comes to employee?
I don't know if signal's the right word. Context. It's very easy to miss context
Like,
and miss. I think I mentioned it earlier. Miss what's driving people rather than what categorizes people. So I think, with flexible working or attrition and well-being, it's easy to miss the impacts on working mothers or people with caring responsibilities or people who are approaching burnout or that context, which puts a very different spin, a very different flavor on things. It's not just disgruntled people moaning, it's people struggling to cope with something, or people who've got a constructive suggestion that maybe haven't. So I think that that's really easy to miss. I think the sort of big signals in terms of engagement that we tend to miss is just the very subtle decline in the trends over time. So, you get less likes on your Slack posts, or there are less people turning up to company events than there were a year ago. Those kind of very faint signals that might just indicate that something is beginning to change, or something is beginning to sort of prevent people. And again, like those trends are very sort of context dependent, but I think they sort of wrap up with each other.
So I think it's the subtle things over time, maybe other things to watch out for, and whether those are trends in attendance, or whether it's subtle changes week to week, month to month in responses. Those are the things to keep your eye on. It sounds like.
Yeah. Responses, tone of responses. Yeah, there's just the subtle indicators.
Yeah, and that combined with the context is it sounds like that's key.
Yeah. And I think again that's to go back to the example I mentioned earlier for that measure, that's why we were using that sort of linguistic analysis, like words related to it's really subtle. You're not going to notice it through reading all the survey comments.
Yeah.
But 3%, then 4%, then 5% of people are talking about panic or fear, or that's a trend, and that's subtle.
Fascinating. So if someone wants to sort of start implementing a more sophisticated, employee listening program, let's say they've got surveys and they're doing maybe quarterly surveys, and that's kind of where they're at, what would be your sort of advice and tips as to like taking that net to the next level of sophistication? What would be the Sam Valentine playbook?
In my play, listen with intention, listen with focus, listen with intention, listen with a hypothesis. So you can, like, listening for discovery is great, but like hypothesis testing, I think, is going to lead to solutions. So we think that people are leaving because they want to be paid more. Is that coming up in the data that we're getting? No. Okay, must be something else. So like having that intention, having that focus, I think listening to understand why people are doing something as well. So that comes back to sort of, I think, what I mentioned earlier about the explaining why. So what are the problems that you've got as an organization, and what are the top 3 or 4 problems? Like it could be attrition, it could be internal movement, it could be like low productivity, like any of these things that come up. Are people telling you why that's happening? If so, what are they saying? And so that combining it with the O data, the operational data, so what you're seeing on the ground with the X data, the experience data, and making sure that as much as possible it's coming from the business rather than a push from HR. Yeah, again, how many surveys, how many well-intentioned things flounder because HR go, here's a load of data, and leaders go, we haven't got time for this. So as much as possible, like listening to be a strategic partner to solve specific problems, I think that's always going to get results. I think also little and often, that works well. So the big bang whole company engagement survey is great. It's got its place, but more specific, granular listening, and as much as possible face to face.
Fascinating.
That'd be my basic playbook.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thanks for listening to the Voices to Action podcast. If you're ready to move from listening to leading, you can discover how Relative Insight transforms your feedback into proactive intelligence. You can visit relativeinsight.com to learn more. Follow us on LinkedIn or Meta. All future episodes are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And until next time, keep turning voices into action. See you next time.